Hey folks, thank you for tuning in. I think we'll give everyone some time to join in. Isabella, thank you for being kind enough to join us on this show. So let's wait for some more audience to join us, and then I can do a proper introduction.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. All right. So let's get started. Let me start by introducing our guest here, Isabella Bedoya. So she's had a pretty interesting, career. So she started as a head of A&R at a hip hop label under Sony Music Entertainment. Since then, she has helped, various marketers with, influencer marketers on TikTok, other social media platforms. In the past few years, she's been, a pretty huge proponent of AI, and she's running a community called Marketing Pros, which has helped hundreds of marketers, salespeople equip themselves with the latest and greatest AI tools, a whole array of ChatGPT prompts. Some of which is essentially future proofed, I would say, several marketing careers for the age of AI that we're currently in. So thank you so much, Isabella, for joining. So
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. So today we thought, so we've had a few sessions on, authentic selling live has talked about AI. We've talked about, disc selling. We wanted to particularly focus on the generative AI aspect of it today. And, Isabella is something of an expert in that area. So let me start, by asking what are the kind of interesting use cases that you see, in the generative AI space today, especially with relation to the sales or the marketing world?
Well, generative AI is, I'll just put it this way, it like literally is everywhere. In every use case that you could think of, for maybe the past 6 months or so, if you've been somewhat involved with AI or like at least familiar with AI, most people know that it can generate copywriting. Um, but if you take it like one step further, it can also generate images. I don't use it a lot for images. I know there's a lot of people like way more immersed in the whole image generation. I typically use it more for like anything that has to do with, for example, copywriting generation for landing pages, for email marketing campaigns, for blog posts. I have tried doing like lead magnets with it, or just like PDF downloads, stuff like that. Um, I also use it for like marketing purposes, so like actually creating the copy for, let's say for like LinkedIn, for example, like LinkedIn carousels, LinkedIn posts and stuff like that. Um, but taking it one step further, one of the most impactful use cases of AI so far for me has been conversational AI, which is essentially bringing in agents, like actual AI agents, to have conversations on your behalf. With conversational AI, it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily like just copy. It's literally voices now. You're actually talking to an AI agent. It's not even a real human, and you're able to hold conversations. They're also able to take actions on your behalf. So that part has been pretty interesting. I think we lost Muru here for a second. But that part has been pretty interesting. If I dive in a little bit further in generative AI, for example, oh, you're back. Awesome. Yeah, if I dive in just a little bit further into generative AI, I think it really just comes down to like what are you currently doing and working on, and then kind of figuring out how you can integrate AI into your processes. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I think it probably comes down to identifying what are your needs right now and how do you. The question is more of how do I use generative AI and less where do I use generative AI, right? It can be used wherever you really want to use it, but it's about putting it, in the right part of your workflow, depending on where you can increase productivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it. And you spoke about conversational AI. So can you talk to us a little bit about how do you use it in your, because I see some impressive results on, the marketingpros.ai website. So I want to understand how you're using conversational AI to produce these kind of results.
Sure, yeah. So basically I'm still sort of newer to conversational AI. It's something, I mean, it's the whole world is pretty much new to this technology. That's what makes it so exciting. But when it comes to conversational AI, like one of the use cases that I have been using is if we get like an inbound call, for example, it'll be an agent, not me, not a real human. It'll be like an actual AI, artificial intelligence voice able to interact back with you. So if you're calling in for like, customer support questions, it'll be able to guide you in the right direction. Alternatively, another thing that I use it for is anybody, for example, anybody that joins one of our workshops, anyone that opts in, we then have this AI agent call them back to whatever number they opted in with, and just make sure that they got everything that they needed, and then try to do appointment setting from there. And then so it's like that use. It's basically sales or customer service use cases.
Got it. Wonderful. So I think that ties into a really prominent worry in a lot of professionals, particularly in the sales customer success sort of space, right? At what point will I get replaced? There is this looming fear of AI taking over and making my job redundant, and in some sense, AI agents are not able to fully replace human salespeople or customer service reps today, but it seems like in the future it could happen, right? So what are your thoughts on when will AI take human jobs, or to what extent would that happen, right? Can you share your take?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And this is important that we talk about it as like as a whole, like society as a whole. It's by I have read studies that by 2025, even 2030, this is when we're going to see a bigger impact of jobs being replaced. Um, I don't remember off the top of my head right now, but there's just to say a figure. There's an accurate stat on Forbes and on Fortune. Just to say a figure. Let's say it's you know I can't remember the number. But anyways, let's just say, for example, 400 million jobs are going to be replaced. Well, from those 400 million jobs, there's also, and that's not an accurate number. I have to look up the number, but it's almost a little bit more that will be generated. New jobs will be generated from learning how to use AI. So there are going to be there is going to be a mass change in the marketplace. The market has to correct itself. This is just something that happens every time new technology comes into play. We saw it with Uber, right? When Uber came into the market, it displaced all the taxi drivers. Now taxi drivers have adapted and they now are Uber drivers. So or they're, off doing something else. So I think it's just something to keep in mind. It's not necessarily a you're going to get replaced and it's the end of your life. No, in reality, it's like this you might actually get replaced. You in the near future, you won't. But the way to kind of have job security or do your own thing is to learn how to use AI because this is going to give you all the opportunity. Right now, if you know how to use AI, if you know AI skills, generative AI, conversational AI, you're in like the hot market. And learning how to use these skills is really not that complex. If you just invest some of your time to sit down and master the tools and learn how to use it and then dedicate time every single day to like learn, you'll be ahead of the curve. And for knowing how to do that, we've seen places like Netflix, for example. Netflix hired someone that is, I think it was like head of product, and their salary was like $900,000, annual salary, which is just by learning how to use AI, you automatically become, higher paid and also super in high demand. But I do think that this is like a sad reality that there are going to be a lot of jobs getting displaced in the near future. This is something that you kind of can't really prevent that. It's just what a matter of what do you want to do right now. And if you're listening to this live and if you're here, then it's a matter of like, okay, well, let's take importance to AI because it's not going anywhere. So I know a lot of people say like love to say, AI is not going to replace you, or at least not yet, but people that know how to use AI will. This is a very common phrase that people say in the AI space, and I think it's like, the more that AI keeps moving, now there's AI agents. Like AI agents was not a thing a few months ago. So even people that know how to use like prompt engineering, those people are going to get replaced as well. So it's just a matter of just staying on top of it.
Yeah, I think that's a very nuanced response, because a lot of people, if you slide to either extreme, if you say, what, AI is never gonna touch your jobs, or if you say, AI is gonna take over and it's gonna be all doom and gloom, either of those people, either of those groups have something to sell to you. So I think this sort of nuanced response is it's a lot more closer to what reality is going to look like, couple of years from now, 5-10 years from now. So that's really helpful. Thanks, Isabella, for sharing that. So you you spoke about prompt engineering. I had a I have a point of view there. I want to hear your take on it. So right now, I see a lot of carousel posts on LinkedIn saying, this is how you prompt Chat GPT to do X, Y, Z, and this is how you prompt it to do A, B, C, right? So I feel a lot of it, it's like teaching people how to Google. So Google is a search engine. A good search engine is supposed to give you what you're looking for when you look for something in natural language. And AI, or an actually intelligent AI, is supposed to understand what people are trying to get the AI to perform. And the less you need prompt engineering, the more intelligent an AI tool is. That's really how I see it. But I also want to understand your take on where we are right now, or how far are we from getting to a place where AI is that intelligent.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I heard a podcast yesterday that actually said ChatGPT and like generative AI is like one of the first softwares in the entire world that, or like technology that gets released without a user manual. And it's like mass adoption, and then the rate to keep up the learning is so challenging. So I think right now, what we're seeing right now, if you learn how to use prompt engineering, you're definitely going to be ahead of the curve. One thing to also note, like, this kind of ties into the previous question of like, will humans actually get replaced? You have to also realize that AI is still a technology, it's a tool. So there is going to be a human is still the person playing the role into how this is all used. So for that reason, you're not 100% going to be replaced from the whole process. I do think though, given, in a few months or even in like the near, in a year or so, I do think that we will see more, like ChatGPT. Now, when you go into ChatGPT, it has these like bubbles that you can kind of just press on them and it's already a pre-built prompt. It's just a matter of time till ChatGPT collects all the data that it's been gathering and creates workflows that it kind of will offset that. Is it in ChatGPT's plans? Nobody really knows, but I do think that it's just a matter of time till we start seeing more and more automation and systemization around prompt engineering. The same way that I can generate code right now, I think eventually it will be able to. And actually, ChatGPT, as it is right now, if you know how to prompt it, it can actually generate more prompts for you. So it's not even like that far, far off. Ultimately, though, when it comes to using AI, I do believe that you have to have some sort of skill or expertise, because in order to get the best use case out of tools like ChatGPT, if you're really good at like marketing, or you're really good at sales, or you're really good at like copywriting, you're going to be able to ask it to do something with more expert insight that AI on its own won't be able to do for you. Or a junior, right, coming up after you, they won't be able to do that because they don't have the skill set that you have. So in that sense, if you kind of, you know, go even deeper into that, you're going to definitely be ahead of the curve.
Definitely. So, yeah, you mentioned, uh, a little while in the future, chat gpt or other tools could probably productize it and reduce the need for such complex prompt engineering. Right now I do think that a wave is happening. One is, people like yourself, people like Isabella, folks, if you haven't yet, go and check out marketingpros.ai there. So there's a lot of good work being done in automating or building workflows that put together prompts, intelligent prompts that make your life easier. So Isabella has a boot camp starting, if I'm not wrong, in 15 days or so, and definitely consider joining that. And similarly, there are a few products, Humantic AI being one of them, where we think for the end user, prompt engineering should not be a concern. So for salespeople who typically just open their Salesloft or Outreach or whatever tools they use on a day-to-day basis, all you really need to do to write a sales email is understand what is your buyer's problem, or understand what is your buyer's pain point, understand how can you make their life easier. So that's the customer's pain point and your value proposition, and really the email address of the person you're sending an email to. So Humantic AI pulls data from that particular email address or a LinkedIn URL and says, for this particular buyer, for this particular individual, this should be the length of your email, this should be the subject line, and this should be the tone and style of how you deliver this particular email, right? That makes the entire prompt engineering thing a non-issue. All you really have to do is think about who am I getting in front of, what is my messaging, and then how do I put it across. So I'm not just creating any random email, but I'm creating an email that my buyer or this particular individual human would respond to. So there is a lot of work happening in that space. So salespeople tuning in, definitely give Humantic AI's personalized email generation a go. I think you'll really love it. So the plugs aside, let me get back into some of the questions I had for Isabella.
But that's actually really quick, just to touch on that. That's exactly a case in point, right? Because it's like, because your team is really good at sales, prompt engineering, keeping things, the whole sales process, you're able to now create this tool that now it eliminates having to do prompt engineering. So even, and I think this is like the future of AI tools and AI apps. I do think that this is where it's kind of heading, where it's like, before we've only had access to maybe like 5 copywriting tools, maybe 10 copywriting tools. ChatGPT came out. Now we have a tsunami of apps. And I think these apps are only going to continue to get better based on the experts behind the apps, which is then also going to eliminate having to do all the work around prompting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So one of the things that really I find fascinating is with AI making the production of content, or like sales emails in case of salespeople, or blogs or LinkedIn posts when we're talking marketers. It's, on the one hand, it makes our lives easier as professionals. On the other hand, it makes the audience or the recipient of these emails or the readers of this content, it becomes a lot more commoditized, and it becomes a lot more noisy out there. So how do we tackle this? I also saw an interesting content experiment. I can probably pull that up, but before that, we can probably talk about it at a high level, right? What do you think? So how do we deal with this dilemma?
Yeah, I think anything that is generated by AI should always have, it should always be edited by you.
Yeah,
So for example, if you're sending an email, I've asked ChatGPT in the past to create an email for me. Usually it'll be very, very polite in a way, right? It's like, very courteous, like, dear blah blah blah, I hope this email finds you well, and it'll just go into the email. It'll be very wordy, very polite. It'll almost be like a whole letter. Well, and for example, in cold email, if you start an email saying, I hope this finds you well, you're
yeah,
already kind of like, that's dead space, right? You should always start that with like bolder hook, or like a sentence that packs a little bit more of a punch that will continue to keep them reading.
yeah.
So even if AI generates the email, now through your knowledge and your expertise, now you can actually erase that. Now, if you're not using a tool like Humantic, if you're just using, let's say, ChatGPT to create an email, you can then also do something like input your best performing emails as examples and say, here's a really good performing email. I got like X amount of replies. Using this style, create another email, right? Or create a version two. So you can, it's knowing what to look for in the email or in whatever content you're generating. It's knowing what to look for, and the way that you know how to look for those things is just through your own skills and expertise.
Yeah,
So this is where it's like tricky, you know, because it's while a lot of people place fear of being replaced, if you're really good at what you do and then you tie AI, you augment your skills and you become way better than everybody else.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So this is the interesting content experiment I was talking about. Let me pull up my screen. So Brooklyn Nash from Beam Content ran this interesting content experiment where essentially he commissioned a generative AI tool, a content shop which charges clients on a per word basis, and a pretty seasoned 10-15 year old experienced content writer, all to create a blog post on the same topic. And these are the samples, introductory paragraphs from each of these cases, so the audience can probably take a guess on which one of this was created by a seasoned content professional who's been doing this for decades, versus which one was created by an AI tool, and which one was created by a content shop. Let me also put up this question for Isabella. What do you think? So for me, I've read this article a few times, and there are like different aspects to this article, how the introduction is structured, or how is the conclusion crafted, and all of that. One thing that really strikes out to me is the content shop, where low quality content which has been produced at a fast pace, and this AI generated content have a lot in common, versus this expert generated content stands out, to me at least, by leaps and bounds. What do you think is the reason behind this particular phenomenon?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. I do think that it just comes down to like skill level. So, for example, like expert copywriters will know that you should keep essentially for readability purposes, you should always keep your sentences like one line per sentence, maybe one line and a half per sentence. So you can quickly scan through and still be able to understand the gist of it. Um, People that are either new to copywriting or aren't like as far advanced into the skill of copywriting, they usually still write paragraphs, and people tend to skim through paragraph, like they tend to skip the middle part. Usually it's like the first line, the last line that they read.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that initially like stood out to me is like, well, yeah, the readability is like, you know, it's super bulky, and then you have better structured sentences.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, chat gpt, I use it for a lot of things, and one of the things that I particularly like using it is for SEO content. If I have to structure it, it's brilliant, but it's a little too wordy. So sometimes I have to go and give a custom instruction saying, assume the reader is a intelligent reader with a lot of context coming in. You don't have to dumb down things and keep repeating yourself, making yourself redundant. I think that is a tendency that most AI tools tend to do today, because that's the sort of training content it's working with, right? A lot of blogs from the early 2010s, just until recently, people used to be extremely wordy. But I think some of the trends in how people are consuming content is also changing rapidly, with like TikToks coming up, and the sort of content that performs well in a platform like LinkedIn. So a lot of that is changing, and I think we have to, as humans, like you mentioned, Isabella, lead the way in changing how this content, or as marketers content, and as salespeople, our communications, how it's structured, right? As long as we have our foot on the pedal, our hand on the steering wheel, I think a lot can be accomplished with AI.
Yeah, and even in your prompts, you could also add examples of good performing content. You could also add things like, avoid being verbose, or generally in like, for example, the English language, for it to sound a little bit more conversational, you should have a mixture of like short, medium, and long sentences. So if you prompt it with all of that, and again, these are things that you either pick up through um, being involved in copywriting, or you learn about it through the more education that you get in the topic. But this just goes to show, like, the more that you know, I kind of think about prompting as a framework. So when for example, I created this no code tool where you can create carousels, and I kind of, whenever I kept prompting ChatGPT to do it, it was very, like, very wordy, very, it was not good. So then I just broke it down and I said, okay, look, here's what you're going to create. Slide one is the title page. The title page should be a 5-word bold hook. Slide two, you're going to complete the sentence. In this guide, I'm going to show you, and then you're going to recap everything that you're going to be learn. Right? So now I'm breaking it down to the most minute detail. Slide one, slide two, and it's kind of, you're now thinking of it as a skeleton. And I found that whenever I started prompting, ChatGPT with like that level of detail, it was generating almost essentially almost copy paste copy. So this is how granular you have to kind of think about it.
Got it. Got it. And I think, do you think this is something that comes with experience? So one is the domain expertise, and two is just how do you deal with AI, right? Because that's also on the mind of a lot of salespeople, and I think that's worth talking about. So there is a plethora of AI tools out there. What are some things you should keep in mind when you're evaluating a new AI tool, right? When you're incorporating something as part of your daily workflow, how do you successfully evaluate it, give it a fair chance, but at the same time, don't get extremely consumed by your expectations in a way?
Yeah, this is like the probably one of the most common problems for a lot of people in AI. There's so the way to stay ahead in the AI space is to essentially be aware of tools, but also it can be very, very time consuming. So I would dedicate, you know, for example, 30 minutes out of your day to just like explore. There's way too many tools out there, and I think very quickly you can kind of understand from like landing pages and stuff like that, what's going to be helpful or not. Also, there's a lot of creators on LinkedIn that are like constantly sharing AI tools, so you can kind of shortcut your way of googling through just going through those creators. um, but realistically, like, once you find a tool that works for you, like, I don't think you should be spending more time finding other similar tools. For example, there's a video editing tool. I'll just say, for example, like Captions AI. Captions AI is amazing, but it's mobile only. It's for iPhone only. So that's not necessarily like super helpful when you're using when you're like editing for people. But then there's like Opus Pro and Opus Clip, Opus Pro. With that one, it is desktop friendly. So now it's like, okay, well, that actually, Opus is one of the fastest growing video marketing tools out there. So I think it's one of those, like, find the one that actually works for you and it works in your use case. Also, I think another thing, it just comes down to personal preference, because some people will like the aesthetics or like the UI UX a lot better on, like, the interface a lot better, or whatever the case is. So I think it just comes down to like boiling down what you like, what is helpful, what can actually help you accelerate and replace the process that you were doing manually. And once you find that, try to stick with that for a while, because otherwise you're going to be onboarding, you and your team to new tools all the time, and majority of them can accomplish the same things. And then the other thing I would look for is social proof. So what are people saying? What experience did the founder have in the back end? Because if the founders or the founding team didn't have a lot of experience in the subject matter, chances are that that is going to be a very generalized, whatever is creating is going to be very, very generalized. So if they do have, some sort of expertise in the niche or in the subject that they're building their tools, that is going to be most likely a way better tool than anything else.
I think that's really helpful. So one of the things I was doing, recently was just seeing what are the kind of overlap I have in all the AI tools, that I have currently, and that really helped me, figure out how am I getting the best out of all these tools available to me, all these AI features available to me. All right, I think we are coming towards the end of this show. Isabella, if you have any, like last minute takeaways or where people can find you, do you want to, take a couple of minutes, tell our audience here, more about your coordinates, social coordinates?
Sure, yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Isabella Bedoya on LinkedIn. Or I think you can just click the name somewhere on this live. um, you can find me there. And yeah, you did mention the boot camp earlier. So the next boot camp I think is in the middle of November. But you can just go on my LinkedIn. I'm always posting like super helpful content and curating a lot of resources as well, helpful resources. Not just by me, by other companies that I find that are doing like helpful stuff around AI. I'm always sharing because at the end of the day, my goal is to empower people and learn how to leverage AI because it's not going anywhere. So it's a matter of us adopting it, and as a culture, really shaping how we deal with this technology. So thank you so much for having me, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me and start a conversation with me.
Thank you so much, Isabella, for taking the time. Folks, definitely give Humantic AI a shot if you haven't already. Particularly the personalized email generation. It's a new feature that we've launched, and you'll really like it. So give it a shot. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or anyone from the team if you need help getting started. So,
Yeah, definitely do that. I have used it and it's amazing.
thank you so much. Let me just end this. And awesome.